Live from our regional media studios, I'm joined by Jonathan Furman with Furman Transformations. And Jonathan, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Sean.
Let's talk about the tech world, because there is a battle brewing between Facebook and Snapchat that people might not yet be aware of.
That is correct, and it is a very interesting one, to say the least. Essentially, what you've got going on right now is you've got Snapchat, and really Snapchat is just a very, I would say a pretty simple app. There's nothing too intricate about it. But back in 2012, they were gaining some steam, and Facebook noticed them and actually offered the company, this was a young company, they offered the company $3 billion, and that's not million, it's billion. So you'd think in a situation like this, an app company coming up would consider, maybe consider the offer. Spiegel, the founder, actually turned it down. And they realized, hey, if Facebook's offering us $3 billion, we must have something here. We're going to keep ramping this up. And that was sort of the beginning to this feud going on here.
$3 billion. That was incredible.
Right, exactly. Exactly. And so I think that's sort of a vote of confidence in Snapchat to say, okay, maybe there's something here. So maybe whether there is or there was not, it gave them a little bit of an idea that they could do something greater. And so that's what's been happening. And so what you see, and this is over the last couple of years, is Zuckerberg. If you know Zuckerberg, he was, I would say, probably not happy that he didn't get that he missed the offer. So you've seen them actually put out a lot of imitations, essentially trying to replicate what Snapchat's doing, because Snapchat is gaining a ton of market share, and they're gaining a huge following, and that's what they have going for them. So what happened is Zuckerberg puts out, I think, 2 or 3 different copies. They had Slingshot, they had Poke, and then even more recently than that, they had acquired Instagram, which was another huge, I guess you say, app or program in the picture sharing space, which is different than Snapchat, but similar in some ways. So he had acquired that. They had actually come out again then with Instagram Story, which was essentially an exact replica of Snapchat Story. So he's just throwing everything he can. I mean, he's going nuts with this. He's really trying to do it, and they can't seem to put their finger on exactly what it is that's allowed Spiegel to gain this momentum. And so more recently, after several attempts, Facebook, and this is where it becomes very relevant now, this is back in 2 months ago, towards the end of April. The Facebook had their conference. It was the F8 conference. All the major companies have their conferences. Google had I/O. Facebook had F8. Anyway, Zuckerberg at this time essentially declared war on Snapchat, announced they were going to be putting out Facebook camera effects. And essentially what this is it would take the concept of what Snapchat is, which is essentially, essentially a silly version of augmented reality, that you could have silly pictures involved in, that pop up and that involved in the app that they're using. Essentially what Facebook camera effects would allow the user to do is actually allow developers to take what Snapchat is and leverage that to essentially allow any content or any app that runs through Facebook, the entire neutral platform that Facebook is, to actually make use of that technology. So literally democratize the entire technology across the entire Facebook platform and wipe out Snapchat, or I guess you could say, or what's left of Snapchat.
Wow, that's pretty stunning. I mean, what is Snapchat's response to that?
What was Snapchat's response? Okay, so this is where it gets interesting. So what you're seeing now, and I think in a lot of ways, Snapchat or Spiegel, he's got a few things. He's got a few tricks that he hasn't utilized yet, and they're starting to roll out this plan. We're seeing it in stages. But essentially, there's a couple of moving parts. There's a couple of things that are going on. He actually just put out, not long ago, they put out a product called Spectacles. Well, first of all, let me just say they've also changed their name to Snap. So they've got sort of an umbrella company now. But they put out Spectacles, which was essentially another silly fad-like version to add, or a component to add to Snapchat, which essentially the user could put on glasses and see like the little rainbow and record that, and essentially just integrate it into the Snapchat app. So again, they're still riding on the same fad there. And if that was all they're doing, in my opinion, that would not allow them to essentially become what they need to become, given the amount of funding that they have and the valuation that they're being given. They would need to do something much greater, because you're talking about a company that's valued post-IPO between $20 to $25 billion. And this is an app we're talking about. They were actually in the red. The first statement they put out, they were in the red $500 million. So why it's getting this valuation, I don't know. But what I do see is I see a systematic plan. I see things being rolled out. So where it gets interesting, and this is actually much more recently, there were 2 acquisitions that were very quietly made by Snapchat. And the 2 acquisitions, the first one was Control Me Robotics, which is essentially, and this is going to come out of left field, but this is a drone company. So you got to ask yourself for a second, what is Snapchat doing acquiring a drone company?
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't make any sense, because for what they are, it doesn't make any sense. So when you think about it a little bit more, what you're seeing is that they're starting to try to branch out into other technologies and literally become the Facebook, where they're not just an app; they've got multiple components to them. Another acquisition that they made was Placed, which is essentially and this is actually a couple months ago. This was in 2017. It was a consumer tracking analytics program. The Control Me Robotics they were acquired for, I believe it was under $1 million, very cheap. This one, $200 million. They're spending a lot of money acquiring some very advanced technologies. And again, what it looks like they're doing is they're trying to branch out. They're trying to be something more than what they are right now. Whether or not they will live up to that valuation, I don't know. But I think it will be very interesting to see. And I think that, if you look at all the apps that are coming out now and everything that's coming out from Silicon Valley, on the smaller scale, I'm not talking about the larger scale, but on the smaller scale, how are these apps going to, what approach are they going to take going forward? How are they going to position themselves? And what is Snapchat saying to them on that front?
This is really fascinating, because, Snapchat could essentially be a massive bubble.
Exactly. And that's what I'm seeing. That's what I'm seeing. And I think this is why it's really interesting to start looking at Silicon Valley now. Is that it seems to me, and I don't want to say that information is a technology is a bubble, because that's very far from the truth.
Right.
Everything is becoming an information technology, so that's not going anywhere. That's just going to keep getting bigger. But I see a little bit of an app bubble. And I'm not going to say for sure, but what I see is that I see tons of money being put into these apps, when you've got 50 other people doing the same thing. And keep in mind, Snapchat was not the only one to do this. There was this type of an app before it, but it was just how Spiegel positioned it that allowed him to get that following. So it's not anything that revolutionary. And so you've got to wonder at some point, when does the valuation, when does the perception of this company, when does it get a correction? When does it become realized? When does it become something that you can put your finger on?
Now, let me ask you this:
and what does that mean for those other apps?
Yeah, that
are similar.
Excellent question there. But why has Facebook failed in the past to connect with people the way Snapchat has?
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. I think that I think in the beginning they did. Because if you look at Facebook, the way that they started was they went from college to college, and they actually did it via exclusivity. So they built up Facebook originally on a similar, I guess you could say a similar premise, but not so much of a fad. It was more of just a systematic way of doing it, but they did have a very, very narrow audience, similar to how Snapchat is now, in the beginning. And so they marketed specifically to college kids. They made it exclusive to college kids, so you couldn't actually have a Facebook if you weren't. And then from there, they essentially rolled it out and allowed it to gain steam. And now it's become billions of users on it. So I don't think that they couldn't get the same following, because they've got way more users than Snapchat. Because you're talking about a neutral platform. You're not talking about a game or an app.
Sure.
So I think that they have the ability, but when a company reaches